You're here to see Stay Out of the Kitchen, a DLP security bake-off. So please welcome our speakers today, Zach Lanier and Kelly Lam. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for being up at this hour. I don't think 9 a.m. actually exists in Vegas, but apparently it does. So, yes, I'm Zach Lanier. I'm a senior security researcher with Duo Security.
And I'm Kelly Lum. I'm one of the security engineers at Tumblr.
So, just a few things to get these out of the way now. There are a plethora of DLP products and DLP-like products. So this is sort of an ongoing project for us in terms of assessing different vendors' stuff. So this is certainly not exhaustive. Note that there's the security qualifier ahead of the bake-off part, which meant that it's not necessarily telling you which is the better product so much as telling you which is the product that has what bugs. That's totally like a lame excuse to say that we started finding bugs and we were like, oh, screw everything else. We're just gonna work on these.
Pretty much.
So, a lot of people had when they think DLP, they immediately think things like DLP bypass. So this is not necessarily focused solely on that. So the agenda, we're just going to talk about what DLP is. It's not that digital light processing thing. What the products were that we actually evaluated in this first phase of the research. We'll talk about a little bit about what their sort of constituent components are, and then what sort of methodology we employed for this, and then we'll discuss findings and finally conclude. So, an overview of DLP.
Okay, so what is DLP? Why do we use it, or why would we want it in the first place? So it stands for data loss or data leakage protection, and basically it's what the name says. It's just prevent stuff that you care about, stuff that's maybe sensitive, intellectual property, credit card numbers, whatever you want to define as sensitive. From either leaving the company or getting in the hands of somebody who shouldn't have it. So obviously, I have somebody who's responsible, an intern who's responsible for, cropping photos all day long. Probably shouldn't have a list of your, top 10 clients, advertisement deals. If you're, an advertising broker, you shouldn't be having a list of all your upcoming patents that you're going to submit for on his or her desktop. And there's a few different ways to do this. You can either have something, let's say, that's sitting on your desktop or, a server, depending on what you're monitoring for, or, you can have something sniffing on the network. Some of these monitor in real time. Some of them just kind of do a pass over all of the files on the operating system, just kind of do like a little inventory. So, some of it can be, I just copied and pasted a whole bunch of stuff that I wasn't supposed to into an email. Let's, take that person and just stop them right when they're doing it. Or it can just be like, here's all the shady looking stuff on this person's computer. The administrator reviews those logs every once in a while.
Yeah, and still there are others that will actually crawl databases, SharePoint, other CMSs, et cetera.
So why are we picking on DLP? Why did we decide to look at this particular thing? Well, it's something that is, it's been around for a while. I remember first looking at a DLP solution maybe about 4 years ago, but it's, just kind of gaining more and more traction as we go on, especially now that we see more and more breaches, things, credit cards getting out that aren't supposed to. Target was obviously the one that will probably popped into everybody's head. But other things too, industrial espionage. Somebody in the company decides that there's a little chunk of information that maybe the competing company wants to get their hands on. That's another example. I don't know if these little screenshots are showing up, but you see one, a U.S. engineer stole a patent from a company. A Forex trading engineer was selling things that he wasn't supposed to. But why pick on DLP, or why choose that to kind of find bugs in? This kind of idea came to us because my first job out of college was actually finding bugs in black box security appliances. And that was back in 2004. And what I learned from that first job was just because something is a security product doesn't mean it won't have security bugs. And so I wanted to see if that held true today. And as you'll see, and as Zach and I will show you, the answer is yes.
And one of the other things that's interesting about DLP, much like any other security products, they have very advantageous positions in the sense that they can monitor, since they have to sniff traffic to find things that are getting leaked. That usually requires, monitoring all the traffic. Additionally, since agents, endpoint agents, crawlers, et cetera, have to be able to index everything or do real-time monitoring, obviously that requires high privileges, so things run as God on everything. So, and then finally, one of the other things that when kind of selecting who we wanted to go for in this research, we noticed that a lot of big vendors, and this I'm probably preaching to the choir, big vendors scoop up the small vendor and then kind of like integrate them into their portfolio, and then they sort of like slowly shelve them at some point. And they don't really give that product the security TLC that it really needs. So there is actually some previous research in this area. Securosis has done a lot of research around DLP. Mainly around how to deploy it, how to maintain it, best practices, et cetera. Actually, a few years ago, here at Black Hat, Matasano gave a talk on defeating DLP, and they actually had a really, really cool, basically, test harness to identify bugs and be able to identify bypasses, instrument inspection engines, et cetera. There was a DEF CON presentation a couple years ago, specifically around OpenDLP, and which is actually was one of the things that we evaluated. And there have been a whole slew of others, but these are the ones that really kind of stood out for us.
So just to go to a workflow example, and this is just an example that I took from Trend Micro, but the methodology, or how you're going to basically spend your time in these products is pretty much the same. I'm just going to look, sorry, pardon my stance because I have to see what I'm looking at. So you're basically going to decide what data you want to identify, right? You're probably not too concerned if your employee is writing haiku on, in Notepad, but maybe you're concerned if they're copying, HR's copying people's salaries into Notepad, obviously. So you're going to make some identifiers of things you want. Usually it's some sort of regex, it's a list of keywords, for example. Maybe you're not even just using DLP for sensitive data, but you could use it for any kind of data. Finding adult content is one thing that this product can also be leveraged for. And then you are going to make rules around that. What do you want to do once you find what you told the product to look for? Do you want to maybe take that file off the file system and store it in some sort of quarantine? Do you want to maybe just log it and so the administrator can look at it later and figure out how to act on it? There's even, in Trend Micro, for example, there's an option to encrypt the data, and which was a little confusing to me at first, but it sort of makes sense that, okay, if we have some sort of internal policy, or we're complying with some sort of government mandate that all this type of data, all health data, all credit cards, whatever, needs to be encrypted, then let's just boom do that right now so we don't have audit come in and scream at us. Okay, then you're going to figure out, there's a few things you can do. You can do a data discovery, which is basically like, okay, one time only, let's just get all of the agents, whether they're network agents, agents running on host computers, agents that are running against shares, let's just do a mass scan and tell me what's out there. And that's usually something that people will do initially just to sort of get an inventory about what sort of stuff they're dealing with. On the other hand, you could create a policy, and that's sort of going to be an ongoing thing. I want to, I got all the big, pardon my French, clusterfuck stuff out of the way. Let's do an ongoing, sort of keeping the house clean, making sure that, tidying things up on people's computers. And so then you can, obviously, the agent needs to know what it's looking for. So you're usually going to end up deploying a policy to these agents. which is also interesting, and like Zach mentioned before, this has a little bit of a repercussion. It means that you're going to, one, you have all these agents on all these desktops, they're going to have to speak to this management console. And vice versa. The management console is going to have the ability to push content down to these agents. So that is, basically opening up a line of communication depending on where you're putting this DLP stack that may be opening up holes in the firewall that maybe weren't there before, for example. And is it animating? How do I make it? Okay, there we go. So this is just an example of how you would create a rule in Trend Micro, and I'm just going to go over here just so I can see what you guys are seeing. And it's pretty straightforward. You go in, you decide that I want to make a rule that says I want to find all the files that have the word potato in it or something like that. You can make a list, right? And so you can import, let's say, all of my favorite kinds of potatoes: Idaho, russet, those little baby fingerling ones. And then you can put that in there. Then you have to tell it what kind of files you want to crawl on. Maybe I'm only concerned about potatoes that are in JPEGs. I don't want my employees looking at pictures of potatoes all day. That's ridiculous. Why would you want them to do that? So let me have it scan only on JPEGs or GIFs or whatnot. Or maybe we have a policy that all files concerning potatoes need to be encrypted. Well, then I want to look at things like text files, Word documents. Once you do that, you can make a policy. Like I was saying before, you see something with potato, I want to immediately quarantine that. I don't even want the person to touch that potato file anymore. That's just, no, stop.
So since I know you're probably all clamoring to know who's on the list, and I know a couple of the vendors are probably here. So this is what we looked at. We looked at Trend Micro's DLP management appliance, virtual appliance, Trend Micro's DLP endpoint agent, Sophos, they're a Staro UTM, they bought a Staro. There's actually someone taking a photo because you can take it back and be like, we're on the list.
We're not on the list.
So we have Sophos endpoint security on there. We didn't really evaluate that too in depth, mainly because it's like AV plus a bunch of other stuff. But we did we'll go into the details a little bit, but we did go into sort of looking at how that talks to the enterprise console, so that got thrown in there. Websense, the Triton management server, which is a unified management console, their data protector endpoint agent, as well as the data security protector virtual appliance. And then finally, for good measure, because it hasn't been beaten up enough, OpenDLP. So, and obviously many of these are cross-platform. That OS list is not exhaustive. Those are just kind of the ones that either the thing runs on or that we evaluated.
Great, and just, not to kind of unfairly stack the deck against OpenDLP, but we just kind of wanted to throw in sort of a non-corporate enterprisey solution in there just to see, how they're different. Maybe one's better for something, maybe the enterprisey ones are better for other things. Maybe OpenDLP is super awesome and you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on these other solutions.
So to kind of break these down, just an overview of what the main components are of these. So Trend Micro,
right. So Trend Micro consists of you have a few different options for how you can use this product. And I'm actually probably going to go in reverse order. I'm just going to jump around on these slides. So there's the management server, and like I showed you before, that's where you're going to define all your policies, just sort of keep track of all the machines where you have an agent deployed, or keep track of all your network agents. You can push different policies to different endpoints. So let's say you have an IT cluster and then you have an HR cluster. Maybe there's different sorts of data that you want each one to be monitored for. There's also, and like I said, there's endpoint agents. We looked at the Windows one. I do believe there are ones for other operating systems. And what we found that was interesting about that is, unless you pass in a flag on the installer, it acts like a rootkit. And I thought that was kind of cute. So if you go into, Task Manager or whatever, you're not going to see it running. It basically just kind of buries itself. And that sort of makes sense in a way. It's a little sketchy, but if you are trying to prevent your employees from doing bad things, usually, I guess it's a good idea to let them know that, or for them not to know that there might be something on there that's watching them, because then they might try to get around it.
Yeah, security through obscurity has always worked really well in the past.
Yes, it's definitely great. We didn't really look at the network agent too much, but it's basically like a virtual appliance. It's not something like an actual network tap, but it's just going to sit there sort of sniffing everything that flows by it. And there's another interesting component, which is called the remote crawler, and we'll talk a little bit about why it's a little funny what this remote crawler is later. But this doesn't even make any sense to me, but they say it's for assets that are for machines on a corporate network. So what's going to happen is you're going to install this on somebody's desktop, and it's going to sort of like the agent just scan all the content on the person's desktop, basically whatever directory you tell it to scan, and it's going to report back to the management server about whatever it found. How it can do that if it's not on the corporate network is, we'll talk about that later.
So Websense, like I mentioned, made up of this Triton management server. It's this unified management console. It runs on Windows. It's all Java magic. Java server faces, which is a giant pain in the butt if you, which I'll explain later. Excuse me. And it uses MS SQL as the backend. All the various agents run on Windows, Linux, OS X, and you figure this out in your head why this is important. That they install all these network drivers and file system drivers. So obviously they can do real-time monitoring, much like AV. Drivers have never had any problems, so that's okay. And it can also actually monitor clipboard operations as well. So like Kelly was hinting at earlier, when you copy and paste stuff that's not supposed to be there, it will freak out. The Protector appliance is just a Linux-based virtual appliance. It has this restricted admin shell, but when you set it up, obviously you can put in a root password and you can SSH in as root or whatever. And much like every other DLP product, there is a crawler agent option as well.
Oh, and just in case we're talking, we want to do compare and contrast over sort of what the technology stack is for both of these. Since we didn't really touch on it on Trend, it's similar. It's the appliance is MySQL on a Linux. Let me see if I can remember what it was. It was a Debian or it was Red Hat, yeah. And it sort of had the same thing. There was a restricted admin shell, but you could, you can log into the appliance as root, and you can do root operations on it. So you want to put, which is good. It makes it easier to poke around if you want to do things.
So this is really short, just because they all start to become the same after a while. Sophos, like I said, we didn't really look at the endpoint agent so much as the management console and its communications with the endpoint agent and how policies are managed there. It's mainly this whole mess of .NET, and it's actually a native, it's a Windows native application. It's not web-based, unlike literally everything else. And then finally, OpenDLP. It's actually provided as you can download it and install it on a thing, or you can download the virtual appliance that's already created for you. It's Apache with just this absolute mess of Perl underneath. There is a Windows agent that can be used to do indexing and file identification. There's also, when you build policies, you can use PCRE.
There was a little bit of C in there too, right?
Yes, and obviously the Windows agent is actually native. It can do SMB or SSH to connect to a system remotely and do crawling that way. And it, oddly enough, although we didn't really go into it, the previous research that was cited kind of went over this. There are like Metasploit modules for this, like to use OpenDLP. So it's very strange, like using Metasploit for like defensive purposes, but apparently people do it. So
yeah, and for deployment of some of the monitoring stuff.
yeah, well, and that makes sense. You should exploit everything to have indexing of documents. So just a side note, KeyView, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with this. I had never worked with it or seen it before, but apparently this thing is like literally everywhere. So it's used a lot in messaging platforms. So like Domino, for instance, uses this. It's pitched as this, being like for big data and document indexing and parsing. And what we kept seeing was that there's this process that kept showing up called KVOOP, KVOOP, and I guess it's key view out of process. But what this is KeyView, owned by HP Autonomy division. They provide this SDK that is used to build filters around documents that KeyView parses. So you can have a Word document, PowerPoint, some other unstructured or otherwise structured data, and kind of normalize it into something that you can then apply rules to. So obviously this is used in DLP products because that makes sense. So what we saw, for instance, in Websense was that there's this EP classifier process that would then spawn all of these KVOOP processes. Suffice to say, find a bug in KVOOP and you get the power up and win the game. Is that actually animated? Oh, sweet, great. It actually doesn't animate over here. So we're going to talk a little bit about just kind of sort of the testing methodology that we employed for this. It's going to be another really awesome looking table. So for network appliances, we kind of looked at the parsers themselves. So as data came in, how is it actually being able to parse it? How is it then applying filters, et cetera? So we kind of threw some files here and there, that were mangled or otherwise invalid. Looked at the update and deployment mechanisms to try and identify, are things being sent, are policies being sent in plain text? Are the policy elements or blobs or whatever? Are they signed? We actually looked at the operating systems themselves, just kind of like to see out of the box, is it, what is the configuration like? Is any hardening applied? Are they applying exploit mitigations for any unmanaged code? And we applied that as well to like the management server. The endpoints themselves, again, some of the same techniques were employed. And we also, where drivers and services were being installed, like those kernel drivers, the file and network drivers. We applied fuzzing, or as some people call it, fizzing. So ioctl fuzzing to try and see if we could get a privs through kernel drivers, et cetera. Excuse me. And then for the management server, also looking at how the database, if there was a database that was either provided with the management server or if it set up an instance of something. For instance, Websense has the option to either use an existing MS SQL instance or to just install SQL Server Express.
Yeah, and just that's basically how the databases are set up, right? Are they just doing, are they dumping everything into one table? Do they actually schema something out and make it, make it sense? Are there different users on the database tables? Let's say, there's a sensitive database table. There's something that's, just maybe a list of strings that we're putting into the web app, or are we just running everything as, MySQL default user, making sure that the password is something that is not hard-coded on the device, or let's see, did it randomly generate a database password, or is it just using the same string for every single install? And if so, how do you connect to that database? Are endpoint agents directly connecting to the database, or are they talking to the server and the server doing the database logic? If I can log into the database remotely, are you allowing that database user to configure that password, or are you just going to have to get stuck with the same piece of information over and over again? Obviously, it's better to have your database not have a port open where anybody in the world can talk to it.
And then finally, of course, if we didn't cover it, the web server or web app itself, where the administration app, I just put lol OWASP top 10 because I mean there's a lot of badness there.
Just audit it like you would audit any other web app.
Right.
I'm sure that's been covered by somebody sometime on how to do that.
So since you're all waiting so patiently for this, the actual findings. So just kind of some general findings that came out of this research. So what we observed was like there's little to no hardening on the Linux appliances. Pretty much almost everything runs as root. And on anything Windows related, almost everything runs as local system. During some of the installs, you actually have the option to provide different credentials, as well as what credentials you're going to use to connect to any of the like the management server itself, or to any of the agents, or anything that's otherwise unmanaged. But everyone's just going to press. I want to get to the finished screen. The agent software itself runs as root on any agent that we observe pretty much runs as root on any Unix-like system, and as local system on any Windows host. And there's just this general absence of some security best practices. This probably kind of goes back to the point made earlier about these things getting purchased by a larger vendor and sort of just kind of not really cared for over time. So there's also some occasional bug inheritance. Obviously, this little heart thing right here, I don't know, heart bled. Wasn't really a big deal. Didn't affect anyone. But where these services are using libraries like OpenSSL, obviously there is some bug inheritance there. Many of the vendors were quick to patch things like that, only because that was so catastrophic for the entire internet. But nevertheless, there is a lot of shared attack surface.
That's also something to keep in mind when you are considering, adopting one of these products. What is the turnaround if something like Heartbleed happens and you have that vulnerable version running on your machine? Are they going to empower you to maybe patch the device themselves? Is it so heavily, sewn into the way the system works that you won't be able to do that because you might break something and you have to wait for the vendor to do it? And also, how easy is, let's say you find one of these bugs that we're going to talk about later, is there something you can do to maybe do some mitigation so that the either make it less likely to exploit or make it less damaging if it is exploited? Is that something that is possible, or is it basically, turn the damn thing off and throw it in the closet until somebody gets around to making a patch?
So first up.
Okay, so first up is Trend Micro that we looked at, and I'm just going to go straight to it. First bug we found. So basically, the way we worked at this is Zach and I kind of like divvied these up. I just happened to get Trend Micro. He just happened to get other ones. It wasn't really something that was a deliberate decision for one reason or other. It was pretty random. So basically, I installed this thing and started poking around the management console, and is that running?
No. Yeah, I think it is now. There you go.
Oh. Whoa, that just spoiled it. Anyway, so obviously, cross-site scripting isn't an impressive bug. It's something that if I was really patient, I could probably teach my mother how to find. It's so at first I was like, oh man, this is lame. Nobody gives a crap if there's cross-site scripting in this, but it's such a basic bug. Why didn't I found the first one just trying to create some rules. I'm like, wait a minute, I can put like a less than character in here. Okay, that's not good. I was like, oh, it's displaying the regex back to me, and okay, this is great. There were about that I think I validated about 30 of these, and then I just kind of stopped. After that, it just wasn't fun anymore. It was sort of like the horse was sort of like a big pile of horse pudding. It wasn't really a dead horse anymore. It was sort of like an amorphous blob. So yeah, there's a lot of cross-site scripting in this. Next up, cross-site request forgery. And this is, again, sort of, basic OWASP top 10 bug. This was concerning to me because what I was able to do was, let's say I'm an administrator, I'm just sitting around and, taking a break between administrating some stuff. I want to, I don't know, browse the internet, look at some boobs. I don't know what administrators do in their spare time. But, if you happen to go to a site where maybe not the most reputable one, or maybe you got an employee in your environment is like sends you an email and you have, I don't know, live scripting in your email client because, it's 1999. We all like to do that. We were able to set up rules. Basically, I didn't see any protection on any of the functionality in the admin panel. So I know that we said that we're kind of going to touch on DLP bypasses, and I think most people are saying, how can I get around the filter? Well, I don't, why go through the effort of getting around the filter when I can just turn the filter off or change it to, I want to look at potatoes, so I'm just going to change potato to, what's the enemy of the potato? Light. Yes. Light is the enemy of the potato. So just going down this rabbit hole of just bad choices on the part of this, and I don't know, this is sort of indicative of either when they kind of bought this product. Let me erase that. They did buy this product. This is not something they built in the house, but it's just interesting to me that just basic secure coding best practices could have found these, except for this one, where I just think it was very strange because the endpoint agent in and of itself does use encryption. It uses SSL. This is the remote crawler, and maybe the reason for this is because they were talking about the fact that you don't have to be on the corporate network, but that kind of scares me, right? You're gonna have all this plain text stuff just kind of flying around. And it's also Java serialized objects, and I wish I had a little bit more time to play with this. Unfortunately, and this is sort of the recurring theme of our exploration in this, is that we basically just kept finding bugs until the licenses ran out. So I was trying to get a Java deserialization bug, and then it just, I don't know if it sensed the fact that I was being a bad person and decided that my license was invalid, or if it's just I should have procrastinated a little bit less. So we'll touch briefly on Sophos, and just to kind of balance this out, since that was all pretty dire. What we didn't find in Sophos, it was actually made me very upset, because I like .NET a lot, because I like to see it get broken a lot. And the fact that they did things pretty, they basically used the Microsoft standard libraries. That's great for them, because the Microsoft standard libraries, even though, I'm sure most people don't like Microsoft and, it can be a clusterfuck, they did do things, the right way. They did parameterize their database queries. They did do encryption right. They used encryption where they should use encryption. They used hashing where they should use hashing. They did treat their input and output the way you should, this is HTML, okay, I'm going to HTML, encode this before I spit it out anywhere. Basically, this is a really boring slide because they didn't screw up anything.
Yeah, which is kind of counter to how, people have beat up on Sophos antivirus so much. And found, RCE in Sophos antivirus. Yet, as far as the DLP aspect of it goes, and the management console and the libraries surrounding that, yay? I don't know. I'm not endorsing them.
And that's not to say that, they didn't find any bugs. This is obviously the least vulnerable product. One of the things that, is obviously the recurring trend whenever you're doing bug hunting and everything is you kind of start finding the low-hanging fruit first, the cross-site scripting, the cross-site request forgery. And as you go on and on, the more complicated bugs sort of arise. And so since this was just because I, wasn't able to get a cute little alert box to pop open within 5 minutes of opening it doesn't mean that there isn't something shady lurking, under the surface that we haven't found yet.
So the Astaro UTM, or Unified Threat Management thing. So that, I don't know if anyone knows the history of Astaro. They used to make like a Linux-based firewall thing, and it got then purchased by Sophos some time ago. They kind of did a pretty decent job at an OS level. Pretty much every service is chrooted. Yeah, I know, chroot's cool. Those are really hot and kind of lame, but whatever. They actually did drop privileges correctly. They kind of actually thought it out. The web application itself, the administration panel, not really a whole lot going on there. There are some really low impact things, mainly around just XSS protection headers, but beyond that, there didn't really appear to be anything wrong from a security standpoint inside of the web application itself. And kind of out of the box, the thing has pretty tight network level restrictions, login restrictions, so there's not a whole lot going on there. So yay. So OpenDLP. So the open source DLP product. So this is really, we just kind of stopped here because much like Kelly demonstrated with Trend, there's CSRF in OpenDLP such that you can delete policies, edit policies, disable policies, pretty much anything that you can do. There are no CSRF tokens or anything of that nature. That kind of stunk. The positive aspect to this, of course, is that since it is open source, you have a little bit more control over adding that functionality or that security feature if you wanted. Unlike some of the other products where it's a little more opaque.
And just a note on that is that if you are not comfortable patching your own products, I guess the last time the OpenDLP product was modified was in 2012.
Yeah.
According to their GitHub page or wherever the repo was. I don't know if that just means that they were like, okay, this is awesome, this is beautiful, I don't need to touch it anymore, or if they've abandoned the product. But obviously just something to keep in mind.
So, did that animate? Ah, sweet, good. I worked really hard on making that, by the way. So, Websense, and I'm obligated to say this. Both Trend and Websense are aware of these issues that we discovered. Websense, I don't know if someone from Websense is here, lurking in the audience, but I spoke with them the other day. This is being worked on, so this will be addressed, I believe, this month. Okay, so there's a little bit of background here. Unfortunately, the demo video does not exist, but there are screenshots. My license ran out, so I couldn't go back and make the video. So when you create a policy in most of these DLP products, like Kelly said, you can create just static keywords, lists of keywords. You can create regular expressions. In the case of Websense, the regular expressions are actually Python regex objects that are then serialized to disk. And this is done using Python's pickle module. And if anyone's familiar with pickle, the way that the pickle VM works is if you do something like actually define the reduce method, when that object is deserialized, that code is just executed. So what that means is that you can just have arbitrary code execute if you have control over that pickled object. So the general rule of thumb is don't take in untrusted, pickle data. So this is just an example on the right. That screenshot is just one of these .pic is the extension that they chose, not to be confused with PYC. This is one of their regular expressions that's been serialized to disk, file types.pic. So what happens is the Triton management server, when you build the policy out or use one of the existing policies, these are basically kind of, all the policy elements are kind of encrypted in this weird sort of base 64 encrypted nonsense. Not base 64 encrypted, I understand the difference, that's not encryption. Encrypted, encoded, and then pushed down to these, the agents and to the appliances. And then they're loaded during the policy update. So the scenario here is that if there's an administrator of the server itself, the Triton management server itself, not the Triton aspect of it, but that host, or someone with access to the where the files are stored, the policy files are stored, overwriting one of those .pic files that's in use by one of the policies, they replace it with arbitrary pickled Python code. So what this means is that you get just sort of, well, I think we called it like distributed arbitrary code execution. So yes, there's a caveat, but nevertheless. So this is our really, really, really awful POC on the left. That's the pickled version of it. And this was done using anapickle by SensePost, which is really awesome for generating like pickle payloads. It'll like automatically make magical shells happen. But yeah, overwriting a legitimate policy file. In this case, I think it was like driver license patterns.pic. And that totally looks like driver's licenses, right? On the next policy update, that then gets pushed out, the reduce method is hit, and you have your reverse shell. So on the, as mentioned before, on the Windows agents, the Windows endpoint agents all run as local system. So this code would execute in that context. And on the protector appliance, as well as the other Unix-like based endpoint agents, that all runs as root. So yay, you get the power up and win the game. So the other thing I think that we had to discuss was we had a note on DLP bypasses.
Yeah, this is basically just for us to opine a little bit on that subject, because that's, one of the things that we get asked a lot is how easy is it for someone to get around this? And there is a lot of perspective for DLP bypasses. Well, we're just trying to prevent, good people from doing dumb things. I accidentally cut and paste something somewhere that I shouldn't have. Like I said before, if you are able to trick the admin into, getting that CSRF phone hit, then why not just delete a policy? But I guess it does bear repeating that if somebody really wants to get around your DLP solution, they're going to. They are going to put this in a, use some basic steganography and put it in a picture of a cat. They're going to, probably take a picture of it with their cell phone if you allow them to, have a cell phone at their desk.
Yeah, I think the idea here is that this is obviously not a panacea, right?
Yeah.
So much like the MDM talk that was given yesterday, wherein the idea was like, here's a security product or a management product, here are bugs in that. That was kind of the objective here, not so much like how to bypass it, but here you're adding something that has an advantageous position on your network, and it has a problem, and someone exploits that thing, and they get the power up and win the game. So.
One of the things that, I'm just speaking from experience here, just at the various corporations that I've worked for, is, it is obviously a very easy or very attractive thing to do. Say, oh, well, we have a real problem with web bugs, let's buy a WAF, or we have a real problem with data leakage, let's get some DLP in here. But, every new thing you add to your security stack is going to add attack surface. And, it's a little concerning that, yes, you can be making yourself more vulnerable when you think you're actually ramping up your defenses.
So I think I screwed up and left out the to-do slide, but since this is an ongoing thing, kind of what's next for this project, for anyone we would love to collaborate, of course. So KVOOP was obviously very interesting. So looking a little bit more at that and how that plays into DLP, as well as how it plays just into a lot of other products would be interesting. Additionally, looking at other DLP solutions, we actually got asked by another vendor very politely, literally politely, not angrily politely, if they were on the list. And we were like, no, you weren't, sorry.
Would you like to be?
And I said, we wish you were, but unfortunately, it was too difficult to get a trial license from you, so we didn't include you. So I think that this isn't done yet. This project. And
I think that maybe this is one of the reasons that this there have been talks on this, but not as many as I was actually it surprised me that there weren't more people weren't talking about this. But I do think the fact that you either have to shell out thousands of dollars to buy this product, or to convince a marketing agent that you're considering buying the product in order to even get your hands on it, is maybe what's saving them from having more jaundiced eye, or more critical people, poking at it. So, just keep that in mind, that just because you haven't seen, this sort of thing for the DLP product that you're looking at doesn't mean that it's, just super tight. It may mean that, the people who are sitting around trying to, write exploits for it or find bugs in these things just didn't want to bother, convincing a sales guy to give them a license.
So if you're looking for which thing to buy, this is not the right place. So I think that kind of brings us to a close. We have a bit of time for a Q&A. So, but before you shuffle out and get more coffee or whatever, first would like to thank you for actually getting up. It was very painful to get up this early, but we did it anyway. So, any questions? Literally no.
You have some slide. There's a little image in the corner that was rotating. What's the significance of that?
What is the significance of the image in that should have rotated? I don't know. I think it was just an artifact of Keynote. I think it's it was an indicator of where we were in the presentation.
No one really knows. It was very strange. We just kept making the slides and like, what is that? Can't get away. It's sort of like maybe a JPEG artifact kind of thing, but only Keynote version of that.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you were looking at the database connection, whether any of the agents connected directly to the database. Did you actually find any architectures where they had the agents directly connected to the database?
So the question was, were there any of these products that had agents connecting directly to the database? In Websense, for instance, and OpenDLP, no. I didn't observe that. I don't know if Trend actually did that, but.
So I was kind of confused about why the endpoint thing was doing what it was. Where we saw with that plain text traffic. From what I saw, the agents weren't talking directly to the database, but when I did go into the server and see, what ports were open, what was listening on what, the MySQL setup was such that there was a user that was enabled to have remote access, and that was basically only restricted via a IP tables rule, which was a little weird to me. I don't know if that's just something, maybe they used to do it that other way and they changed it and they just forgot to turn that off, or maybe there's another piece of functionality that we just didn't get to look at. I just thought that was sketchy, but no, I didn't see any direct queries into any databases. That's actually another thing that we didn't touch on. SQL injection was the one bug we didn't find. Apparently, the vendors knew to use parameterized queries or not use string concats or whatnot, but they didn't know not to avoid cross-site scripting. Very strange. I don't know why that one occurred to them but not the other.
HTML entities are hard, apparently.
Yeah.
Yes. So the question was about sort of the security of the endpoint agents themselves, if they were vulnerable to anything, memory corruption, et cetera. We didn't get very far there in terms of, we didn't find anything. That's not to say that they're not vulnerable. Any of the, like the ioctl fuzzing for the drivers didn't really yield anything, but that could be because my test cases suck. So, but I mean, they're anything that does a lot of parsing of files, anything that is taking input that is being supplied by a user and doing analysis of it, obviously is going to be maybe susceptible to having problems. One thing that I did know, one of the first things I do is usually just get a listing of all the files and see how old they are, what the last time they were modified were. And so if you see something that maybe hasn't been touched since like 2009 or 2010, for example, and it's being used a lot, that's maybe indicative of that there may be a little bit of dust in there that's concerning. But yeah, I think that if we had that to-do list slide, that would definitely be the best place to start to pick up, for your bug hunting. And in particular, that's why one of the reasons that KeyView is so interesting is because it's it actually has tons of libraries that it loads, and then obviously the agent relies on that. So that would be another vector kind of to disrupt the agent, so to speak. So that's why I want to look at that more and more. Yes.
For one of the products, you mentioned that there were a lot of plain text, I guess what looks like Java objects being passed across. And it looks like a copy paste on one of the products that we use that people review. Why is that concerning?
The question was regarding the trend plain text communications for the crawler, and how that kind of looks similar to another product, and just sort of why that's concerning.
So, obviously you're using these products to, locate data that may be concerning, or, to inventory sensitive data. And if something is, sending in plain text over your network information about that data, even if I don't necessarily have that information accessible to me, maybe I'm just going to sit around, on the same network as my coworkers. I know that, Joe or Susie down the hall, they're working on some awesome stuff. Well, let me just, fire up my packet sniffer and see what the remote crawler is sending back to the DLP server. Obviously, if you have a product, or keep saying obviously, but if you have a product that's dealing in sensitive information, you probably want to just, encrypt that sensitive information, or potentially sensitive information, rather, whenever you can.
I think it's too just because since those are directives coming from the management server, interception of things to instruct the crawler what to do, replaying those and getting the crawler to do something that it wasn't supposed to do. As well as just it's sort of sketchy that all the directives, like there's all these serialized Java objects going back and forth.
Yeah, that was another thing that was concerning.
Java's secure.
It was unauthenticated. There wasn't anything going on in that traffic that says, "Hey, are you allowed to talk to me?" It's like, "Oh, look, Java serialized objects. Yeah, I want that. Give it. I want it." So if I want to pop a remote agent on a computer that the admin didn't really necessarily plan on having a remote agent on it, I can just start talking to or pretend that I have a remote agent on it and just randomly start talking to the DLP server.
Yes, I think we have time for like one more question. I don't know where. How hardened the Triton management server really is. Well, so it's made up of a lot of stuff, right? In terms of the management, so it runs like on Coyote, right? It's all this Java's JSP nonsense. The installer doesn't, it just sets all that up for you. You already have to have an existing like Windows box. In terms of just that particular chunk of code itself, no. Mainly because we just found all this stuff, and like all the RCE was a little more interesting than looking at all of Triton itself. There was I pulled it out of the slide deck, but there was since it uses Java server faces as their framework. Java server faces, and I'd never worked with it before, has this view state like thing, like ASP.NET has view state, and it kind of serializes what the current state of everything is. So it's you load balancing, you can kind of keep track of what's going on. It has something similar to that, and that almost acts as like an anti-XSS and anti-CSRF control. So there were underlying issues, like there was XSS that was just basically kind of mitigated by virtue of this view state-like thing being enabled. So there's probably more stuff there, but the overall the RCE thing honestly was just way more interesting. So okay, so if you have any more questions, we'll be, I think, outside for a little bit before falling asleep. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.